Dear students, we will be covering the economic dimensions of aging population in this module. As we all know that the elderly population experiences the important dimension in their needs is about the financial need. As age advances, their health issues becomes an issue, major issue, and furthermore, it coins with the financial dependency will further make them to be highly vulnerable. So, one aspect which we need to know, especially when we talk about developed and developing countries and when we relate the quality of life of elderly, in the case of developed countries, the elderly population have a very fair financial support, whether it is through retirement benefit or with their own savings and also the contributions which they had earlier may be playing an important role in their financial independency. Whereas in the case of developing countries like India, the nature of aging population in their ways of living, especially the financial conditions of the elderly, is a very important where there is a need for financial independency because their dependency on family and other support systems are very, very meager, and in this process elder abuse and other aspects furthermore add in their low quality of life. We need to know that as part of the family transition, most of these societies, irrespective of the level of development, they started moving from joint to nuclear families, which ultimately have started weakening the ties among the family members, which is not advantageous for the elder population and other vulnerable groups. Furthermore, with the growth of individualization, there is a greater alienation and isolation of the elderly from their family members and from society at large. As long as they can work, they can get some financial support. The moment they become dependents and they are not able to take care of themselves and also to contribute in the workforce, then the problem arises in addressing their needs. We have to understand that in a developing country like India, nearly half of the elderly, they are fully dependent on others, while another 20% are partially also. In that sense, over 2/3 of the elderly population, they are financially dependent. As people live longer, they need more intensive and long-term care, which in turn may increase financial stress. This is another important aspect which will reflect on the quality of care by the young members of the family. If they are living for a certain low level of period, there is naturally there will be a contribution by the family and the expectation of bond and intergenerational attachments will further increases. But in the case of long-term care, there will be a lot of stress and strain that the young caregivers experience because as a higher longevity is experienced by the elderly, long-term care is important because for longer periods of care, the young members have to be ready to address their issues. And in the process, a lot of stress and strain they experience, and also it deteriorates intergenerational bonds among the family members. Though health services are available in urban areas, high cost in getting them makes it difficult to utilize them. In the case of rural areas, neither the facilities nor financial support is available, which ultimately has a major determinant for their low health status and low poor quality of life. In all that, it is to be mentioned that the health issues are very, very important, which also have a bearing on the economic aspects. And in that sense, the poorer conditions of the elderly people has to play an important role in addressing the quality of life of the elderly. Those who have a retirement benefits are only few, and they are also mostly from unorganized sector. In that sense, that an overwhelming proportion, more than 95% of the people in the workforce, they are engaged in unorganized sector. So in that sense, the elderly, as long as they can work and get the benefit of a daily wage or regular wage will benefit. But however, if their health condition deteriorates and if they are not able to contribute, they will be nowhere, especially in getting the benefit from the financial security point of view. Poverty is a major threat to the well-being of older persons. That is why the topmost priority of the needs of the elderly, and when we chalk out suitable programs and schemes, we need to see that how best their economic conditions can be addressed in the society. Specific problems of the economically dependent elderly were mainly lack of respect, loneliness, financial difficulties, and inability to find a suitable job. They also contribute individually or cumulatively in addressing the financial dependency of the elderly people. At that age, when their health conditions deteriorates and when there are no suitable opportunities and their skills also are not suitable to contribute, they will be left out, and in the process they become further marginalized, and in this way they become financial dependents, and the young members who invariably have to take care of, given the long-term care for them and also the cumulative way of addressing their health issues, become so severe that the neglect starts coming, and in this process it is a very low quality of life that the elderly in our society experience. As we have mentioned that nearly 90% of the total workforce are employed in the unorganized sector. The level of development is not percolated to that extent. That is why whatever meager opportunities in the organized sector are there, they are very few, and that is why most of the population, they depend in the unorganized sector. The characteristics of unorganized sector are that as long as an individual works and contribute, the person will get benefit in terms of daily wage or a regular period of time getting the financial security. However, when the person is not able to contribute, then the problem of not having any benefit from the employment also occurs. They retire without any financial security like pension and other post-retirement benefits, which all very important for old age. At that age, in the divide of all these facilities, the vulnerability increases. National Fellowship for Older Persons has rightly concluded that 1/3 of population in India above 80 years, 60 years of age group, they are below poverty line. Studies have shown that another 1/3 of the population, though they are above poverty line due to one health episode if they experience and the expenditure which they have to incur for addressing that particular health problem will force them to come to below poverty line. In that way, we are talking about a huge large number of 2/3 of elderly population who are very poor, and in terms of absolute number it increases to a predominantly of a big huge chunk, and they are mostly in the unorganized sector, and also they will be living in slum areas and in rural and isolated areas. This all contributes in not having access to the financial resources, and in that way it also has affecting their low quality of life. Government under standardized economic security policy is covering retirement benefits, especially for those in the unorganized sector, but economic security benefits for those in the unorganized sector and old age pension for especially for the rural elderly is another important aspect that needs priority attention from the policy makers. No doubt certain old age pension schemes are coined and they are implemented, but in terms of the total volume of the pensioners and also the extent of financial benefit that they receive, the frequency in which they receive is also another dimension for understanding the effectiveness of these programs and schemes. Some of the studies have brought out the various identified distortions that exist while disbursing old age pension schemes in the country. For instance, studies showed that there are cumbersome procedures in submitting the application, inappropriate eligibility criteria used, unusual delays in processing the application, and irregular payments. It all contributes for the low frequency and also the irregularity in payments, and that is why though the payment is done once in a while, the actual benefit to the family and also to the young members may not be able to get the benefit. What are the administrative hurdles? There are several administrative hurdles in a national old age pension scheme that are implemented in various states. For instance, it has been mentioned that the hurdles like identification of proper nodal departments, district-wise distribution of targets, constitution of state and district level committees, and opening up of separate accounts, they are all found to be very important aspects that are influencing the quality and the disbursement of old age pension for the elderly. The procedural problems are those of identification of real person beneficiary and money distribution as such are also needs priority attention. In terms of the nature of those who are benefiting, it is very important that when we talk about quality of life, elderly women who are at much greater risk than older men deserve special attention in accessing and utilizing various social security schemes. Access to social security in old age is closely associated with existing gender inequalities. While this may partly be due to gender biased design of pension schemes, it is more significantly a result of women's lower labor force participation, the large number of women who are self-employed, and the fact that women often have shorter and interrupted careers due to childbearing and rearing. They all contribute for their dependency in old age, and at that point of time they become highly depending not only from the family but also from the government and other community organizations, and in that sense their vulnerability issues needs a priority attention. The risk of increasing old age poverty rates is a serious issue. Unless policy changes are made, it becomes very difficult given the high population aging that are going to come and which we are experiencing not only in a country like India but all over the world. And in that sense, it is very clearly shown that the population aging phenomena is much more serious, and also it is further accelerated in countries of most of the developing in nature like India, and that's why the elderly issues requires priority attention among those who are living in developing countries. Amidst socio-economic pressures and increased longevity, customary family-based support is very often far from sufficient and reliable, with a significant number of older persons at a greater risk of either falling into poverty or remaining below the poverty line, which implies the need for policy interventions, especially through adequate and ample social protection schemes. Study conducted by Pannu way back in 1999, in their study revealed that there is an increasing and leading householdship by the young. In many cases, besides ill treatment, the elderly parents are forced to work and do odd jobs despite their deteriorating physical condition and poor health. The elderly, both men and women, who are disabled, frail, and those who still try and work in the unorganized sector are the more vulnerable conditions, and they require priority attention. They largely include landless agriculture workers, small and marginal farmers, artisans in the informal sector, skilled laborers on daily casual or contract basis, and informal, self-employed and domestic workers. In that sense, already by virtue of they being coming to the age group of 60 plus, they become vulnerable. At the same time, if their vulnerability adds through insufficient income, inadequate health care, and also other forms of low socioeconomic conditions, they all contribute for their dependency and greatly affects their low quality of life. The change in life expectancy, social and economic opportunities are significantly altering people's expectations and desires with regard to their families. This accelerated change has generated a conflict between young and old, which is leading to modification of traditional expectations and social understanding. In this context, we have to we have to understand that way back in 90s, United Nations has clearly brought out different documents on aging and elderly care in various societies, and in developing countries, UN has rightly brought out that though there is a need for elderly issues, but given the rural-urban migration taking place in a large volume, the young members and the other young people who are there in the family, they start moving to urban areas, and in the process, the members who are mostly left out in the place of origin are invariably those elderly. In that context, when the elderly are asked to be taken care of by themselves, the issues related to their quality of life will be the important attention that requires of all those people who are to take care of them. Income security in old age also depends on the availability of and access to secure and affordable publicly provided social services, including health care and long-term care. To what extent these aspects related to health care is addressed? As long as they can afford, you can have a private health system through which you can also address your health. But however, given the unaffordability on the part of elderly and their families, especially in the poorer households, the issues comes out in terms of how best we can address their income security. At the same time, access to health care and long-term care services is also needs our special attention. Besides ensuring good health, equitable access and utilization of healthcare services provides a safety net for older people and protects them and their families from falling into poverty in later life as a result of catastrophic out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. In that sense, we need to know that out-of-pocket healthcare expenses in countries like India is very high, whereas in some of the developed countries, there are health insurance schemes, there are adequate access to healthcare facilities, and also the profile of the elderly is also in a higher level of rating, so that they themselves are able to work and get and also benefit from various schemes. In the case of India, there is a huge differences that exist in the economic independency when we talk about state-wise variations. The data shows that in rural areas, the proportion of elderly males who are fully dependent on others is the highest in state like Kerala to the extent of 43%, which is lowest in Jammu and Kashmir state, where to the extent of only 21%. However, in the case of females, the figure is highest in Assam. For instance, it is as high as 81%, and the lowest is observed in the state of Haryana of low as 44%. In urban areas, the situation is slightly better, with the highest proportion of fully dependent elderly males being 38% in Bihar and the lowest being 20% in Himachal Pradesh. But for females, the situation is worse in urban areas, with the highest proportion of fully dependent elderly females being 83% in Jammu and Kashmir and lowest being 50% in Haryana. These state-wise variations are very glaring and also clearly depicts the level of variation that exists in the quality of life of our elderly population. Given this diversity of quality of life of elderly and the huge variations that exist among them, it is furthermore important for us to chalk out how best we can segmentize the elderly population and also to address each specific segment of population to corresponding their needs furthermore is important for all of us. Among economically dependent elderly men in either rural or in urban part of the country, about 6 to 7% were financially supported by their spouses, almost as large as 85% by their own children, and 2% by grandchildren, and 6% by others. For elderly women, there were minor differences between the rural and urban scenario. In the case of rural areas, a percent of 16 depended on their spouse, a large volume of 75% on their children, 3% on their grandchildren, and a few 6% on others. While in urban areas, nearly 1/5 of 19% dependent on their spouses, a large volume of 71% on their children, 3% on grandchildren, and a 7% on others, including the non-relations. What clearly comes out in understanding the economic issues is that unless we work out suitable programs and schemes and address with effective policies and work it out on a target basis, we will not be able to see that the financial needs of the elderly are taken care of. In this context, we need to see that both at macro and micro efforts are required. At macro level, various governments have to play a significant role to chalk out suitable policies and programs and to address the specific needs of the elderly who are below poverty line and also having a various vulnerable situations in their life. And at the same time, we also should work it out suitable skill development programs so that they can be connected to mainstream economy and they also contribute productively. That is where we have to promote productive aging among 60 plus. In that sense, suitable skill development programs have to be worked out so that the elderly with suitable techniques in having enough skills which they can acquire, they will be more demandful and they can be observed in their employment schemes. Furthermore, there is a need for enhancing the opportunities for second income opportunities after retirement, so that at a second level of joining in various programs and schemes and various employment opportunities, if we can create, then it will become an important avenue for them to not only to contribute because they have immense experience and skills which can benefit the society and it also contribute to the economy. That is one important thing which we need. At the same time, once they contribute, it will enhance the developmental aspects in our society. Furthermore, it will also see that elder abuse can be minimized because elderly no more will be dependents and also treated as a passive receivers of care, so that such a sustainable programs will greatly benefit the young members also to respect and improve the dignity of the elderly in their own families, and also the neighborhood also will respect and greatly contributes in enhancing the quality of elderly population. Unless we work it out suitable economic measures which have not only a direct affecting the quality of life but also have an indirect role. For instance, if the economic status improves, their health status also improves because the quality of healthcare they can get it. At the same time, they can prevent disability aspects, they can also get adequate nutrition, and similarly their overall quality of life improves. That is why the financial conditions are one of the important aspects that needs address from all the stakeholders in our society. If we are to build societies that are cohesive, peaceful, equitable and secure, development will need to take account of this demographic transition where the population aging is an important phenomena that requires attention of the policy makers and program managers, so that this transition will become more positive and so that the age transition will become smooth and suitable actions will need to be addressed at both levels and to harness their contributions that older people make to development and ensure that they are not left behind. Furthermore, if we look at national policy on older persons, it clearly says that the elderly have contributed to society earlier when they were very active and they were in workforce. Now it is the time for them to get the benefit of the development and also get their adequate attention of the young members and the society at large. Unless we work it out in addressing with suitable programs and schemes, especially in economic activities, to enhance their skills and to see that they contribute regularly, it will become difficult for us to see that their quality of life can be enhanced. And that's why, as part of the principles of independency, principle of dignity, their contribution should be respected and they should be recognized that the elderly have played their important role in the process of development and they continue to be active and productive, so that once we recognize and chalk out suitable programs and schemes, then we can expect that we are building age integrated society and we are promoting active aging among elderly population. As WHO has rightly brought out that active aging framework is the need of the hour, and irrespective of the level of development of the society, we need to promote active aging and successful aging. In this regard, economic dimension of elderly plays a very important role for us to address these issues.